So this is the beach at Salt Fork State Park. We just had a look here before we moved over to Harper's Ferry, KOA. And again, Salt Fork State Park is a really large and beautiful wilderness area in southeastern Ohio, and it's certainly worth a look for someone looking for some outdoor experience in an urban-ish type area. The next day was one of the signature things I wanted to do on this trip, and that was a major hike along the Appalachian Trail. And my original goal was to hike through the entire state of Maryland, which is 41 miles in 2 days. Ultimately, though, given the comparatively short distance time of the trip of only 12 to 13 days, I thought this was unfair to my sister, so I confined this to 1 day. What we're looking at here is the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. It's just simply to the right of this railroad track. So when you first come to the park at the top of the hill, you walk down a park roadway and you come to this juncture here, which is the Mason-Dixon line. To the right in this image is Pennsylvania, which is a free state, and to the left is Maryland, which was a slave state. So this is a real line in the sand, so to speak. Now, of course, for escaped slaves, this wasn't far enough because the Dred Scott case permitted slave people to come into the North and recapture slaves who had escaped. So they really had to get to Canada if they were going to make it work. But nevertheless, it's quite an interesting place to start from, which I did, and then I came back up the hill to the overlook here, and the views. And of course, you're up on at least 1,000 feet high here, because you climb probably another 1,000 feet after this to the typical height of the ridge. And it is, for the most part, ridge walking on this trail. The footing is, for the most part, I'd say 75% is a dirt type path, which is just fine. But the difference between Ontario and, say, this type of hiking is when you get on these mountains, boy, the hills just keep on going. And that's something we don't see in Ontario, where it's more of an up and down thing. So I'm beginning my first part of my Maryland hike here. It's about 9:30 in the morning. And just got here, and we'll see how far I can go today. It's just an absolutely gorgeous day. Okay, so we got about a mile to go before the road, and that'll be 5.9 miles into this first hike on the AT in Maryland. That's just beautiful today. What a wonderful day for the weather. And we've got squirrels and birds and who knows what else. You can see around me here the beautiful green foliage. And it's about, it'd be in the 70s, or sorry, maybe 20 something today. It's humidity's nice and low, and so I'm just keeping going here and having a great time. So as you leave the first area at the north end, the Penmar Park there, you come south, and the trail bed is actually, for the first few kilometers, is actually quite nice. It's fairly flat and well marked and so on. Is a bit stony, but certainly not any difficulty, and you get along pretty good for, like I said, the first couple of kilometers. But then there's a fairly major climb up the rock face of the mountain, and it's a rock pile, and this really does keep you busy for a little while, and I think we'll see that up here in the next few pictures. I'd hoped to take more video, but I walked over 30 kilometers this day, and I was getting pretty worn out by the end. And I find it's difficult to shoot video when you're doing a fairly high performance day. So here's the mountain side that you begin to climb, and you have these rocks, and you really have to watch your footing on them. There's really, in many cases, no real treadway. You're just simply picking your way through it. And so that does slow you down, and of course with the climb as well, not just the rocks, but the climb makes it a slower process. So when you get to the top of this area here, you're looking at an extra roughly 1,000 feet of altitude, maybe not quite, but in that neighborhood. And you certainly notice the difference when you're up there. And again, this day was just grand from beginning to end. I don't think I hardly saw a cloud the whole day. It was just beautiful. I was very fortunate. And the humidity was far reduced as well. So there's a few signs indicating distances, not too many. You do need your maps, but the maps are not excessively detailed either. They're there, but say compared to Bruce Trail maps, they're not as good. But once again, as soon as you get up the mountain and you're walking along the ridge, for the most part you have a dirt footpath that is clearly very well used in this area, so there's no trouble finding your way. You don't get lost or anything like that. That shouldn't happen. And so there's a selfie earlier in the day. I was having a wonderful time in a famous part of the Appalachian Trail, hoping to complete in a comedic way Maryland and West Virginia. So I could say I've done 2 out of the 9 states of the AT. But of course it only takes 4 miles in West Virginia. But I never quite got all that done given the time constraints of the trip, unfortunately. But still, this was really a wonderful day. So it's typical on the AT to use these types of shelters to stay overnight. This limits also what you have to carry if you don't therefore have to carry shelter equipment and so forth. A lot of these shelters have been reconstructed, which is very nice. Historically, these shelters had only an open front on them and had their resident mice population and the rest of it, and it takes a certain amount of courage, I think, to stay in such a location. And some of the trail detail, and of course the ever-present 2-inch by 6-inch white blaze indicating the trail's direction. This is coming down the hill before the first road crossing at 5.9 miles, so that's getting on the neighborhood of what would that be, almost 9.5 kilometers, so about a third of the distance I did this day. And of course the roads will cross the ridges where there's a bit of a depression, a pass or a gap or a notch, depending on what part of the United States you happen to be in. But the ever-present greenness of the forest was amazing, and you see on occasion upper croppings of the rock and all the rest, and it is even though there were no flowers or whatever, you had periodic views, and again the green is just such a feeling of life. It was a wonderful, I guess some people say they don't like the green tunnels, but I really did enjoy it. This is some rock steps that have been built in, so some nice trail maintenance people have built that in, which makes this a bit easier to work through, which is much appreciated. So this is the first road crossing. I said about 5.9 miles in, and I had done a little extra because I had to come down from Penmar to the Mason-Dixon Gap line and then back up again, which may have amounted to, I don't know, 1.5 kilometers or whatever it was. And then I moved on from here, and then you climb back up the ridge. It was fun. Somewhere along the trail this day I met some people, and I said that the hills were not as high 20 years ago, and the smart aleck who was there said erosion, which was really quite nice to say. So lots of little streams and brooks and so on that run out of the hills, and they're all very pretty. I'm sure in the spring they're much wilder, but still very nice. You see sometimes these rock fences, and in the United States you never know if they're battlements or they're farmers based on all of the things that happen. I would expect in this area it's probably battlements. We're not too far from South Mountain. There's Civil War activities in this area. Here's of course a hydroline crossing, and they cut the trees out of the way to prevent problems with the hydro lines. And it was warmer. I guess this day it got to about 26 or 27 C, but mercifully lower humidity. So this made, although I don't think I could have made it. And further along, sometimes you've got meadows like this one. It was a hayfield of some kind, which grants passage to the Appalachian Trail. And in Canada, you would never see a trail through the center of the field like this. It would always be permitted along the edge, of the farmer would go berserk. Here's another one of the shelters down from the main trail. Further along. And again, just a beautiful green forest with birds and the odd breeze and so on. It was wonderful. About a quarter of the distance at the top, a little past the middle of the trail, you get a rocky portion, which does take some time to navigate. You don't have to climb, but it is, you switch over to the other side of the ridge, and here's a view from that side, and that is wonderful, but you do have to mind your footing, and the trekking poles are wonderful. I carried about, I think it was about 25 pounds that day, mostly water and just my necessary food. I didn't carry much extra stuff, and my camera, of course, on the front. And it was a day I'll always remember, one of the more wonderful days of my hiking experience. Some of the overlooks are blocked a bit. It's regrettable that maybe some of the smaller scrub trees could be removed just to help give hikers a few views. I mean, the majority of cases you're not seeing too much, but the odd overlook when it's possible is kind of nice, and it'd be nice if maybe they were cleared a bit. Further along, we got into, after the rocky portion, we got onto this, what looked like an old carriage trail or logging trail, and you could get along on this pretty quickly, and so I made some time up on this. After the roadway, I had 8 miles to go to make the 20. I guess it was after the second road. I'm sorry, there was a dirt road I passed, then it was 8 miles. So that kind of became my goal, was to get to the interstate highway and then come down to the park there. And so here I am further down now, crossing the I-70 on the bridge. And it's amazing, even though this is a big interstate highway, right around it's all forest and green. You'd never even know it was there, really. It's quite amazing. And here's the enclosed walkway, which has been there for a while now, which is, you know, a really wonderful way, a safe way to cross the big highway and still give some views. After this, you walk up the trail a little bit, and then you're to go down to a state park where I had my sister waiting. But the signage is a little thin after you get there, and I thought I'd missed it. But I ran into a couple of hikers, and I hadn't gone far enough yet. And then when I picked up the trail, it was fairly easy to hike down to the park, but I was surprised how much descending we had to do. I descended quite a bit to get to the I-70, and then you descend quite a bit again to get down to the park location where my sister was found. And then we went, after that we went over to a McDonald's to have a bit of refreshment before we went back to the campsite after a wonderful day. You're alive.
There he is. Okay, wait for it. Isn't he fun? I know. I'm going to keep it in the motorhome just for you. And the Incredibles.
This is the last time Diane and I are ever traveling, but other than that, it's fine.
It's okay.
She also wanted to injure me earlier so she could use the handicap parking.
Yeah. It's why not?
Okay, that's enough of that.